Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Make yourself comfortable. We recommend getting a drink and headphones. Yes, headphones are essential. The first rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. The second rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. This flight will never stop. Welcome to Flight Club. Welcome to Flight Club. This flight will never stop.
Flight Club. Flight Club. Flight Club. Flight Club.
Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Make yourself comfortable. We recommend getting a drink and headphones. Yes, headphones are essential. The first rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. The second rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. This flight will never stop. This flight will never stop. Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Welcome to Flight Club. This flight will never stop.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Flight Club. My name is Klaus Leopold, and I'm the co-host of this show. With me is Cliff today. Hi, Cliff.
Hello, Klaus, and good evening, everybody on the live stream. It's lovely to have you all with us again this evening. Yes, we've been away for a couple of weeks, and so it's been a little bit more quiet recently, but that is all changing tonight. We have a very exciting guest for you. We are talking to Caroline Saltz. Caroline, it's lovely to have you
Hi.
with us. Yeah, can you tell us just very quickly? I know you've been working in all kinds of fascinating industries that are quite different to where a lot of people are doing Agile. How do you end up doing this kind of stuff in construction and manufacturing and carpentry and all of this? Like, how does this end up happening? Tell us a little bit about you and your background story.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Very much looking forward to tonight. Yes, maybe I can start with telling a bit how I got into companies like you just mentioned, in carpentries and construction companies, or actually car garages and stuff where you wouldn't assume agile ways of working, probably. This started with an actual personal situation. So my partner was working at a Carpentry, and they had they did a big sale trip where they talked about the vision of the company, where they want to be in 5 years, and talked about to be the best carpentry in Germany, and everyone will know us. And they came back all suntanned and motivated and want to get started. And it's like, yes, let's do this. And I was like, wow, this is very ambitious what you're looking for here. And so I was also very keen on knowing, okay, how will you approach this? How will you achieve these goals, these visions you talked about while having a lot of wine on the sailboat? And well, in the end of the day, it turned out that, like most of these ideas and visions, they died along the way of daily work. So they had no idea how to approach this. They had no idea how to change their ways of working and their ways of looking at products and services. So I went there and said, hi, you know me, from nice Christmas parties. And now let's talk about how we work, and let's talk about how we might improve things here. And this is how it got started. So from there on, like, people heard about it. There were articles, there were interviews, and from there on, people are calling me and asking me to, come to their companies and talk to them. Which I'm very happy for.
That sounds very cool. Cool.
Yeah.
So we're going to spend this evening exploring a little bit of how this topic comes together. So we hear a lot this idea of, we can't do this and you insert, I don't know, hardware in manufacturing, in whatever it is. There's always something a little bit like we can't do it in this place. So what I'm really excited to talk to you about is how you're actually doing this stuff, because of course you're doing this in so many of those environments where people say, well, we're special and it's different and we can't do that. But before we get too much into the questions, I want to take a quick moment. I already said thank you to everybody who's joining us this evening. The first thing I want to say, for those of you who are new here, we typically do these roundabouts once every 2 weeks. And the idea with this is that we find interesting people like Caroline, who are doing all kinds of interesting things with different companies, and we bring them onto the show, we ask some questions, and we invite you to ask questions as well. So please hit the chat button, jump in, fire away your questions. We'll weave them into the conversation as we go. It makes it far more interesting for all of us if we ask the questions that are directly relevant to you. So please make sure to do this. The second thing, as Klaus is reminding me to do by tapping the button, is to hit the subscribe and like button. So you're all on YouTube. If you enjoy this particular episode, hit the like button. And if you like in general what we're doing here, hit subscribe. And if you hit the little bell button, you will also get a notification in future when we start streams. I will remind you again about this a little bit later, so don't worry if you didn't catch all of the details. But yeah, ask your questions as we go. Cool. So let's talk with you, Caroline, about a few things. So we kind of explored at the beginning. I said this sort of thing of like, well, we say we can't do this in hardware, we can't do this in sort of complex environments or where it's very heavily defined, big complex projects, that kind of thing. And you gave us a little bit of a hint, but can you give us some examples, kind of the breadth? Because as you said, you've worked in a number of different industries that are very sort of traditional and in many cases non-IT even. Tell us a little bit about what kind of companies, and maybe explore a little bit of how does agility look in that sort of a scenario? It's perhaps a little bit different to what we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe first of all, a bit overview of the branches and the organizations. I had the chance to have a deep dive into their ways of working and help them to apply agile approaches there. As we just said, it started at a carpenter's, a very small one. They did fair constructions. It was very interesting because there were huge, big projects, and it was very interesting to see what they have to build, and that wood is not the main material anymore, what I assumed would be in a carpentry. So I started at a carpenter, then the next carpenter. From there, it went to construction companies, where I worked with different departments or different areas in this company. So I had one company where we talked about the whole design development for a new building area in Cologne, for example. Then it was another construction company that was building a bridge over the Rhine, and they asked me to see the construction side and talk about how we might apply agile methods there. That was actually the most interesting customer appointment I had so far, to go to this construction site and to see like, oh, okay, you're building a bridge from one side and from the other, and very interesting. Yeah, but beside this more construction area, I'm also working a lot with pharmacies. Sorry, sorry, I just talked to Cliff. I said to Cliff before, it's quite late in the evening, and I think I used all the budget of my English words already.
If you suddenly just flip into German, I think probably, I don't know, maybe half of the people on the chat will still follow. So maybe it's okay for some, but I will have a hard time asking the questions if you do this. So.
But beside the sector and branches, what is also very interesting is to see the different sizes of companies, where you have very huge and big companies. For example, a construction company I'm working with at the moment, where we talk about an agile transformation for the whole organization. But then you talk to a carpenter or to a car garage or a marketing agency, which is very, very small, and we only have like 10 people working together. But still, it's like, okay, they talk about the same issues and the same topics, and we find ways to apply agility there. And as you asked, is how we apply agility, or how the agility looks in this kind of companies, right? And first of all, it's very interesting how you phrased your question, to say like, oh, people say we can't do it in this area, in this company, or in hardware or whatever. And it's like, people are looking for where can they apply agile, and we need to apply agile, and these companies are having other questions. So usually they don't come to me and say like, hey, we would like to be an agile company, can you help us? They're coming to me and say like, hey, nothing's working here, we are freaking out. It's like, we don't know what, it's like a big black box. I can't put a finger on where the problems are popping up way too late, and so we have really struggled to solve them. We're not good in communication, we're not transparent. The customer, actually, who is our customer? We never talk about this. So they have issues like that.
The very common challenges that I think a lot of companies are experiencing. Yeah. It's somehow
it's actually something they share all.
Yeah. So it's not a completely different world just because we're in software or because we're making chairs or carpentry or cars or whatever. Somehow understanding the customer, learning to build better products, iterate, improve, communicate better. Yeah, this is resonating for me. Klaus, you actually had a question. So
exactly, I
Yeah.
have exactly a follow-up question regarding this. So so if you apply agility in IT or in knowledge work, and if you do it like in other domains, there's one question. So there was actually a conversation in our community the other day. So Nadine triggered the question like, okay, how is agility applied outside of knowledge work in these companies? Like, for instance, if you take a car manufacturer, right? So there are people like working in manufacturing, and you have others who are somehow developing the cars, right? So probably the people who are standing in front of a belt or something like this, maybe it's not a smart idea that they are doing Scrum, right? So but how does this somehow work in your experience? So is when we talk about agility, how do we somehow, or do we have to differentiate between something like run the business? This is like people who are really like doing the work, and others like change the business, improve the business. What is your experience with this?
I totally agree that, sure, it's the same with the construction company. You have the design phase where you have knowledge work, right? And then you have the actual construction part where you would never work with Scrum, for example. There you have a lot of lean principles for their ways of working. What I usually do in how I make the difference is to say, like, I'm absolutely not dogmatic on ways of working. I really think a team needs to figure out their own way, what's working best for them. This could be, maybe a framework like Scrum helps them. Maybe a traditional approach helps them. Maybe just something they've been doing for quite a while and just approving it will help them. I wouldn't say that you have to apply agility regarding the ways of working. But where we talk about agility is when we talk about the business itself. So what are our products? What is our purpose here? Why are we doing this? And what principles do we want to live in our company? Like principles like we want to, the core ideas of agility. We want to inspect and adapt. We want to learn fast. We want to have short feedback loops. We want to have customer centricity, right? And these questions we talk a lot about. So we talk about the core ideas, principles, and values regarding agility, but not necessarily talk about the most common roles you would see in agile companies, like a scrum master or product owner or whatever. This is actually something we usually put aside in this kind of companies, because we rather have talk about, okay, what can we do to have more customer centricity? What might help here, right? And we don't need to apply this whole framework of, again, as example, Scrum.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the most important points when we talk about agility. So I've seen an insurance company, and this insurance company, they have something like claims process. You just have people working there and handling like all the damages that are going on. And they were going into a huge safe transformation. And seriously, they wanted the people like who are doing the claims process and stuff like this to come up with a board, with a Kanban board, and visualize all their claims. And I was like, are you crazy? I mean, because that's the reason why actually an insurance company has something like an IT department, or that's one of the reasons, because they build like software exactly for this. So I think it's quite important that we have to differentiate this.
Yeah, and also the question is, if you talk about boards, then you talk probably about transparency. So usually I miss the question, why are we building transparency? So everyone's like, we lack transparency, and say, okay, so, but what is behind that? So once we have transparency, what can you do, what you can't do now? So what should it help you with? What should it support you with? And usually it's talked about transparency as a goal for itself, and it's not. We use transparency for something else, but let's name it, and this will define how we build boards and how we build systems and make things transparent. And the case you just mentioned sounds like, okay, maybe they didn't talk too much about what is actually what do we want to see and what do we want to make decisions on. It's probably not the claims.
But everyone is doing Agile here, so that's the reason why we also do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think this is great. So Bernd is asking the question in the chat. He was actually asking what were the reasons they were using Agile within their environment. And just to kind of pick up on the answer that because you kind of answered the question already, was that it wasn't so much about wanting to be agile. It was about trying to satisfy some kind of customer need or get better at collaboration and communication internally to the company. And I think this is such an important thing to emphasize, and something to kind of connect with what we do with flight levels is that I think so often what people do is they try to do this stuff in a way of like, the goal is to implement the method or to use Scrum or to whatever. Even with technology, I see people doing this. We have to use the latest JavaScript, something, whatever framework. Like, that's not the point. The point is to solve a problem for a customer or to meet some kind of a need. And so I really like that you illustrated this as like, for them, they're coming to you with actually a clear question. We want to solve this thing, as opposed to just a let's be agile or something along those lines.
Actually, usually I try to avoid the word as long as I can, to not talk about agile or whatever. So to not have this, because then I start Googling it and then everything will be destroyed. So I try to really focus on the pain points they have or the goals they want to achieve, and then it's in the end like, hey, by the way, this is kind of agile we're doing here, but it's I really try to put this aside.
Yeah. So we, as Klaus mentioned, we had some conversations inside the community discussing this topic and what we were going to talk about before we had this session. And one of the questions that came up that I quite liked was Florian, who's one of the Flight Devils guys, was actually asking the question. He says, do you think it's important to speak the language or use the terminology of your clients? And if so, how do you adapt the language that you use normally, if there is sort of a normal, but how do you adapt the concepts of flight levels and this into their context? What do you use instead, or do you just roll with the standard stuff? What's your thoughts?
It's a very good question, actually. My experience is that please don't try to speak a language that you can't speak. This is just silly, and people won't take you seriously. Yeah, if I try to really have the same language as a carpenter, as an engineer or something, it's ridiculous, right? So I don't try it. Yes, I pick up the things they talk about. I pick up the examples they have. I always say like, oh, please don't blame me if I don't get it right, or if I maybe make it too simple. So I'm really not too much into trying to adapt to their language, because I want to be authentic, you know, and things I pick up, which I understand, which I think is a very good word, a very good phrase, a very good expression to use, I will, but I'm not forcing it. So for example, if I tell the story about why it is a good idea to have a stable system, and tell the story that I learned from Klaus, actually, and I took it and I loved it, so I use it anyway. So to say, I'm telling the story of the airport, and is it a good idea to have a lot of planes landing, but no planes are leaving the airport? I'm still using that example. No matter in what company or area I am, and I don't try to make this example with something else. No, I try always to use examples everyone can understand, because that's the simplest way for me, for myself. I want to try to explain stuff that I can explain it to my friends who are not working in this field. You know, so I want to have the chance to have a language that's working for everyone. And so my experience is, please be authentic. It doesn't work to try to copy the phrases, expressions. The only thing I learned really is that the Denglish, meaning the mixture of German and a lot of English words, this is something that doesn't work everywhere. When you go to carpenters or a car garage, there are a lot of people who don't speak English, and they really don't like if you use English words. Yeah? once I was asked to translate feedback to German. And I was like, I have no idea. This
is there
I really
a
I have,
translation?
yeah. So please hit it in the chat if someone has a good translation for feedback, because I still owe them an answer. I didn't know how to express that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I want
so
to just
this
go
is
back to
something,
something
try
that
to-
you said already, which was you're talking about not changing the language. And I think so often what happens, and I've been guilty of this probably more times than I should have, but I learned something, I forget exactly who it was from, it'll come to me in a minute, but this idea of mirroring the language that is already inside the organization, and rather trying to, kind of like in a judo sense, you work with the motion that is already there, find the things that are working and try to amplify them or use that language. Because if you're trying to not only change what people are doing, but also change their language and ways of talking about it, that means you're actually trying to change two things, not just one. And so now you've made the problem at least twice as hard.
Yeah.
And so it's better if you adapt because you're one, than to try to change a company of even 5 or 6 people, or maybe even a few hundred people. Yeah, I like that. Just work with what you've got rather than trying to make everything fit your perfect mold of something. We don't need to be dogmatic, as you say. Yeah.
And also my experiences, I can share that don't try to make the examples working for the sector you're in, because when you have construction people sitting there and you talk about building ships, well, you get another discussion there. Like, this is how you build ships, yeah? This is not how we build ships, yeah? And then it's like, okay, well, you screw up the whole experiment here, this discussion. This is not the point. So go for examples and phrasing ideas in with examples. They're not fitting their context, but more everyone understands it, but it's not their work, because then we will start to talk about the content and not what the example is about.
So I'm thinking a little bit about how we adapt this, in the sense of, so one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, in this context where you're visualizing something that is a little bit different maybe to, I mean, maybe some of it still is knowledge work. I've not worked in this domain enough to know for certain, but it's a bit different to software. We don't use sort of stories and epics and projects necessarily in the same way. So if we're imagining, I'm assuming that you're using some kind of visualization, and maybe that assumption is also wrong. But if you're using some kind of visualization, what sort of things are you visualizing? Like, what do you put on your boards? What is the system that you build this kind of interaction and engagement around? How does that look?
Yeah, so we use I use visualization every time I'm somewhere, because I really think we need to reduce complexity. To reduce complexity while having the same, we're talking about the same thing, because we're looking at the same reality we built here. And the systems we're building are it's very different. We have in the carpentry, where we had the fair construction, we really built the board, the visualization around projects. So really we have to, this next fair is coming up, and there is this car dealer who wants to show his 30 cars. So we have to build like this huge fair stand for with this huge big round thing coming from above, hanging over the whole construction, something like that. So really huge projects. In the construction company, where we were in the design area mostly. So it was about building this new housing area in Cologne. So they had to design, I think it was 20 houses or something like that. And there we built it we had just one visualization for this whole project, because it's like just the design phase is between 2 or 3 years we're talking about. So we just visualized one project. They had like many projects in the company, but the visualization was for one project only, because it was so big, so huge, and so many tasks and so many things we had to show, and to think about how we will cut this big, huge thing we want to achieve here. And this work of 3 years, how to cut it into daily pieces, right? So we just had a visualization around that. With another constructiony I'm talking to, we're talking about building visualizations around the customer, because they want to focus more on the customer. They want to really drive customer centricity. They say we never do that. We always talk about projects and materials and deadlines and whatever, but we don't talk about the customer. So they said we want to build our visualization around customers, because they have long-term relationship, obviously, in the construction area, and they want to have the customer in focus, for example. Another company is like, they also said, oh, we want to have the customer, the system built around the customer. But then there was a discussion, what really is the customer? Is it the person who will bring the money? Is it the user? Is this someone who requested it, the manager? So that was a very interesting conversation we started there. We haven't finished so far. So it's really different, a very different context. And it's always, as I said before, the first question is always, what do you want to achieve with this visualization? So whatever you put in there in the swim lanes, you will talk about. So what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about projects, want to talk about the customer, want to talk about goals. We can also put goals on there. I did that too with one company, to have company goals.
I think that's
there. And then, okay, how do we achieve them?
For me, what I'm hearing is that at some level you might be visualizing some sort of tasks or smaller pieces, but ultimately there is either a visualization of some sort of flow of value, or kind of connecting those items to an outcome. So you talked about bigger project where you visualize sort of the smaller pieces that deliver the outcome for the customer. But in almost all of the other cases, there were sort of smaller pieces that were being shipped to a customer, maybe as a piece was kind of delivered, or how do we balance between the different things the customer's asking for? Does that, is that a fair kind of representation?
Yeah, most of the time it's part of the value chain. Well, in a small company, we get the whole value chain very easily, because we can get everyone in the room and just say, okay, we'll do this now. In big companies, it takes quite a long time to get the whole value chain. But it's really depending. In this construction company with this housing area, again, the example, we had different visualizations. So we started from making visualization for the team, for their daily work, like really the small little pieces they need to do within this 3 years every day to get these plans for this housing area done, which is very, very detailed. But then we had another visualization which showed the whole value stream of this design department for this project within this 3 years. It was very hard to define that and find a way to visualize that, because there's construction is a very specific area, and they have very specific context, which was hard to visualize, but we found a very nice solution. And then on another level, we visualized the different projects they had, not only this one housing area, but this other housing area, and this another project in Munich, and this another project in Düsseldorf, and whatever. And we had another visualization for that, right? So depending on what is really the goal of the visualization. I like that one because we really had this different perspectives. So what questions do you want to answer? Or what signal do you want to achieve and get by this visualization? And what decisions do you want to take with these signals? And therefore, we had in the end 3 different visualizations. It was very nice. I like that. And also to have the discussions very much shifting depending on where they were standing at, at what board they were looking at. And this was very, very helpful.
So this was.
So it sounds like. Sorry, go for it, Klaus.
Just a very quick one. So this was a lot around the knowledge worker part of it. So because what I often hear in conversations that people try to force the agile way of working into all parts. Again, so it doesn't make sense when it comes to a building, for instance, that we say, okay, let's do rapid prototyping and let's just throw some bricks over there and see if a building is emerging, and maybe if it's not an opera, what we originally planned, maybe it's becoming, I don't know, a horse riding, whatever, arena. So this doesn't make any sense, this kind of knowledge. So what you're doing in these areas is that you're in the design phase, you can apply these models there actually, and you can include the customer much earlier and so on. And you build models, for instance, you don't build the prototype, but you build models and stuff like this. So this is just like my experience. Does this somehow match also your experience?
Definitely, yeah. We have in the carpentry, for example, where we have the real hardware. So it was in the carpentry itself, where people were building the fair constructions and not the knowledge work before, but with the construction, making the construction work. And we had this there too. So we had visualization, but it totally looked different from what you would usually do in a knowledge work or what we did in the knowledge part before. And there it was around, for example, models, actually. Yeah, definitely. We work with models to see how we can approach this customer request, because fair construction is very interesting, by the way, and they're very specific needs and ideas how to design fair construction. Yes, and they had to see what materials can be used. We have to make test experiments. Challenge physics, really. It was very interesting. And we built systems around that to also to show we have parts where we need to be very innovative, where we need to work with models, with prototyping, whatever, to see what can work. And then we have parts and projects where we really we're just doing it, where there's very, very clear what needs to be done. We don't need to try to think about innovative ways to approach this. Is actually just get this done. We're talking about lean here. And we brought this all together in one visualization. That was very interesting.
I think what you're describing is somehow something what I would understand when we talk about business agility. So it's really about, it's not everybody is doing Scrum or Kanban or you name it. It's really about figuring out what makes sense in what area and apply the appropriate tools there.
And talk about principles first. They always talk about methods and tools and whatever. And what the hell do you want to achieve? So really, what's the goal and what principle do you do? I always talk about principles first, and then we can talk about tools and methods and whatever.
And what do you want to achieve? That's probably the most important one. I don't know how often the telephone rings here, and usually Catherine picks up the telephone. And people ask something like, okay, we want to introduce Kanban, or we want to have flight levels, or we want to have Agile or something like this. And the very first thing Catherine is saying is like, I hope you won't. So poor you, kind of. I hope you don't want to have flight levels. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the thing that we want to achieve? Cliff, so you were...
There's actually a question that I wanted to ask. So Ben Parry is asking on the chat. He says, how do you get beyond this idea that I think often when we arrive at clients, you sort of hear this, we're already improving, or we're too busy to improve, or something like this. And his question is basically, when you join as an outside expert, how do you get from kind of this, well, we've either fixed it or we're not sure how to fix it, to that statement of what is the problem that we're trying to achieve? So the short list, a refined something of, here are the things we actually want to fix. How do you go from, that first conversation, you pick up the phone, to a list of what we're going to try to fix?
I didn't get the last part because the internet connection is not that good.
Right.
But you see, you put the questions in here too.
How do you get from that request of we want Agile to what's the problem you're trying to solve? How do you get to a point where you can actually describe what they want? What's the outcome they're looking for?
Question. So always you hear I think you get kind of a feeling for are they describing symptoms or not? So I guess you should know what is probably a symptom and what is probably a reason. So usually they come with a lot of symptoms, right? So we don't see, I don't know what's going on in my company. Actually, it's everything takes a lot of time, and I have no idea what's going on. So, or it takes all too long. Everyone needs to be faster. Can you, with Agile, everyone works twice the work in half the time, I heard. So can we do this? Can we apply this here? And it's it's actually asking the questions what they have already done in the past, and usually they have done a lot of stuff which will prove to see this is not the main reason we are talking about. So this is just a symptom, and usually we get there actually quite easily in a workshop to try to find the symptoms, and then ask why you think this is. So it's a basic 5 whys in the end to get to the main point and to the main reasons. It's not that maybe it's very satisfied how I answered this question, but usually we get there quite easy with asking why is that? What do you think why this is? And then again and again, and usually it's just a lack for in my experience, especially in traditional companies who have no time at all because they're so full and they have so many stuff to do, and they not used to reflect at all. It's the kind of first time when I come there and say, okay, well, if you want to talk about this, well, get from every department one person and get them into this room. And once they start talking, they find the reasons themselves. They just didn't find it before, because usually they don't come together and take like 2 hours to talk about this, right? You talk about, you complain about it a lot, but you don't take the time to say, okay, let's do this. And what do you think is the reason? And what also helps a lot is to bring in a fake reason. What I like to do is sometimes when I see they're not getting along, so I make a hypothesis what the reason could be, but I will name something that will obviously won't be the reason, and something that will be they will be a little bit pissed about. Say this, because this is something they get like, oh no, this is not the reason. No, this is not what's happening here. No, what's happening here is. And then they get going. So
you're like, oh, okay. It's funny how these little tricks and hacks to get people to think in a slightly different way. You learn these along the way. Yeah. I think so often what you're describing is about this, getting people to agree what the actual focus is. And it's this thing of we've sort of had some conversation, or we've spent some time complaining about the challenges, but we haven't really all looked at the same picture. And so my list of what's important and your list of what's important is 2 completely different things. And that causes some tension and friction, because we think we're agreed and turns out not so agreed. So I go out and do number 1 and you go out and do number 3. And then we're like wondering, why are we not a team? And we don't trust each other or something like this. It gets complicated. So I love this, get to a sense where people can agree on something, and then we focus our attention around that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And also one step further is to say, not only agree on the steps we need to take, and I think I have to go this direction and you go another direction, in the end it's total chaos, but also really the basic question of what is our product, what is our service, what are we selling? So why is a customer coming here and paying money for what? And this isn't maybe not always what they think it is. Like at the Carpenters, they never talked about the customer, never ever. It was always about projects and always about what they were building, but never about the customer. And I was like, well, you never talk about what kind of service is this customer looking for, and you don't you see that you are part of a big journey of this customer? If they were one Carpentry where they did the interior construction for houses, and they were totally shocked when I said, like, for me it would be amazing. It's kind of this big journey of building a house which will finally be my home, and it is like, I want to build something that will last forever, and it will be my main area for my living. It will be the center of my life, and it's what an interesting journey to start, and you are part of it. And they were like, what? So they never looked at this also the experience for the customer. And I said, well, if I take the money and don't go to IKEA to buy a wardrobe or whatever, but I come here and want to buy it from you, then I want to have the whole experience around it, like being part of building it. How can we do it? How can we design it? I want to smell the wood. I want to touch the material, and to, it should be some kind of really experience and journey to buy this piece of furniture. And I think that is also something I have that a lot, that we end up talking about what is actually our product or service, and who's our customer, and what is the expectation.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting question. I'm going to probably mess up your name, but Sverre Stornes, I think, is how I would try this. The question is basically like, if you're analyzing the flow, do you ever start with a conversation about jobs to be done? It's kind of what's going on here. Why are you doing it? What is the point for a customer? And I think this is so important, because what I see time and time again with the clients that I work with, and I'm sort of seeing the connection, even though I work so often in software. You work with other parts of the company that are doing related services, but the thing is that people have forgotten how, or they don't understand, because it's never been explained to them, how HR connects to the broader organization, or why that finance report solves this customer need, or who does what with the other thing after I do it. So people are just kind of given this job, you do this piece of something. And what we do, and it sounds like you're doing the same thing, is kind of reconnecting people to that purpose, so they can see, oh, okay, this is actually the customer. This is why they want the thing. This is what they do with it. And so the other question that was interesting for me was, where was this? Lesson Nome, asking about retrofitting farms. The kind of question for me is a little bit of, well, why are you doing this? What is the goal at the end of the day? There must be some reason or purpose, and are people aware of this? Because if you know the answer to that, it becomes a lot easier to make decisions about what's actually important to make improvements on. Is usually, Klaus likes to say, it's not a lack of ideas. We usually don't go out of business. Yeah, we have more ideas than we have time. So the question is how to deal with this. Sorry, I'm looking down because I have
to talk about
about the size of a helicopter that keeps attacking my legs. And so every now and again, I need to try and hit it with something.
What is the number of the ambulance?
We will tell you if it comes up in the deck.
What is the number of the ambulance in Sweden? So I can call it when you fall down.
If you see me being carried away like this, then you know why.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yes, I totally agree. So it's first, it's yes, to have a common understanding of the purpose we're doing it. This is why I love the idea of flight levels so much, and the connection between different systems. I just worked with it was very IT, a lot of IT things to talk about in this company. It's from the energy sector, and we built up flight levels there. And it was so important for me to have the chance that it's a huge company, and we have they really had 3 levels and 3 visualizations, and they had a lot of steps to cut big ideas and initiatives to a daily work. They said, okay, we must make it possible. We need to ensure every employee has the chance, when he has 2 options on his desk, I can work on this one or I can work on this one. The person can go up and see, well, this option has an impact on this goal, and this option has an impact on this goal. And I'm really convinced that we need this, because in our daily work we have to make 1,000 decisions a day, and it's so much important to get a good support there to know what impact will that have, this decision, right? And to see what I'm working on, what's my impact, what's my part in this. So to have definitely common understanding of the purpose, but also a good understanding of what the different parts and what the different steps within this value chain are. Just as you said, that HR has also an impact on our product and our goals, right? It's not just, well, it's the people who are doing the software or the people who are really constructing this fair construction thing. No, it's everyone in the company has an impact and a part. And to have a good understanding of that. And what I usually say is what helps me at least to say, once you have a task that you're really, really annoyed of, this is a good sign for you to ask for, okay, what is the purpose of this task? I mean, don't get me wrong, we're not going to have a look at every task everyone is doing, then we would have another problem. But usually the example that you just said about financial reports, I have to fill in this report, or I have to fill in this form, or I have to make this presentation, or I have to give this information in this and this form to management, but I have no idea why and what's the purpose of that. And this is really something where you should talk about and say, you should understand why it is important. And maybe it isn't really, and then it's a good thing to change this, right? Maybe it's not the best way to fulfill the needs that maybe management has. And it's just something we have done for 5-6 years and no one questioned it until now.
Yeah.
So it's always I think it's a good sign when people are annoyed. When you're annoyed in a meeting, when you're annoyed with a task, it's always a good sign to have a look at, are we really sure we understood the purpose of this? Or phrases like, oh, I don't want to go to the meeting, I want to work. So the understanding of a meeting is not work. This is a very good signal to see, like, oh, maybe we should talk about the purpose of this meeting and how this impacts the value we are creating here for the customer.
Yeah, I've seen a fairly strong correlation between companies that complain that meetings are not work and the amount of the meetings that don't work. So maybe some connection between those two things. Just picking up on what you're saying there, I've often sort of said to people that I think the goal of the visualization, specifically at the higher flight levels, is to try to help people really make sense of three things, which is understand how their work matters, where they can help, or lastly, where they should stay out of the way. Because it's often a case where that, more people are not fixing the problem, but sometimes it is very specifically that one or those set of people will really, really help. And I think if we can get better at answering these questions, it really helps people to kind of make sense of, well, yeah, sure, I have something useful to do and I should be doing it over there, or I should be staying away from those people. Super cool. Yeah. So, now we can get back to doing things, and instead of just, I don't know, bumping into each other, getting frustrated, sitting in meetings, whatever else it is we do in between things. Yeah. Cool.
But it's also a lot about trust in that case, though. This is what I see. About trusting. I don't need to be there. No, we're not the whole team needs to be there. No, we don't have to come with 3 people to this meeting. To have the trust, oh, well, Klaus, you go there, and I'm totally fine if you take the decisions, if you get the information, if you give input, it's totally fine. And afterwards, you just, get me on board, and I will do other stuff in the meantime.
Yep.
Yeah. I was just wondering if there was some sort of play on words. I'll come up with it later. But if you know of the term FOMO, the fear of missing out, it's something about fantastic something meeting overload. I think it sort of creates the situation where you just end up with, I see it all the time, like everybody wants to be in the meeting. Like we can't, like if you don't have the trust, as you said, Caroline, we end up wanting to be involved in every conversation because we don't trust that the information we need will be available or arrive in the way that we think it will. Or that we get an opportunity to contribute. And so we just end up with thousands of meetings with thousands of people in it to try to solve problems that we don't even have any time left to solve because we're in meetings the whole time, which is, not.
It's also
an
acknowledgement to know well, if I'm not seen, people don't see my part in this. This is also a huge topic when we talk about meetings. It's like I need to be there, so I need to be seen. Only with a full calendar, I'm a very good employee. This kind of sorry for the word, but this kind of bullshit is really stuck in heads. And this is, these kind of cultures. Yeah, I've seen too many times. This is actually the quite nice thing when you come to like a carpenters. It's totally different, and it's that is the one big thing that is so different to work with companies or departments in knowledge work, is that you the process of defining change and talking about what are the problems, how can we approach this, what might help here, how can we improve things. I mean, therefore, we need to come together, right? And we know this, and we have a lot of post-its, and everyone's writing down, and we say like, oh, go in pairs and discuss it and write it down. And I was quite surprised in the when I first were at the Carpenter that well, people are not used to do this knowledge work. And they were so exhausted after a few hours, where I'm like, oh, we still have like 3 hours left, and it's like, you know, a whole day workshop. So let's continue. And they were like, why the hell is it so cold in here? Because usually I run around the whole day, and I didn't realize how cold it is here in the in this construction hall. And they're really like, they're not used to write a lot. So this was very interesting to see that you have to also think of other ways to approach these things, and also absolutely is the cultural part of it, to say like in areas like for example the Carpenter, they have a culture where it's still like, okay, I will do whatever the boss will tell me. Right? So it's not like I pull my work and I decide what's the best thing to do now. It's more like, okay, you will do this, you will do that. And it's also, sometimes kind of a rough language there. And so to get these people to get involved and to be able to bring their ideas in, which are amazing. I was so flashed of what amazing ideas and really cool approaches they had to solve these problems they were talking about. That was really, really, really good experience there. But you need to have the safety from your boss, and it's really something you have to take a few steps to get the people know, okay, this is now really, I can bring in my ideas, and it's not like I'm not told what to do, right? So so
I think
a lot
it's
of
such
cultural
a complicated,
change in that.
Yeah, it's such a tricky one, and I've spent some time over the last couple of weeks working with Siggy, who's also one of the Flight Levels guides. We're busy working on the Flight Levels coaching change leadership course that we're offering starting next week. And one of the things that I find fascinating inside it kind of gets excited about the tools and the methods, and we want this kind of Scrum and Kanban and the Jira and whatever else is going to go on the go. But as you say, that being able to create a space where people can really bring their ideas forward and be able to share what they're thinking is such a really powerful and important aspect of this, because what's the value in being able to adapt to new information if you're not actually able to even absorb or sense the information that is there, because you're just ignoring, sort of 85% of the company because you only listen to the bosses or the top leadership. It just doesn't make any sense to me. We have to be able to build that sort of a culture and an environment where people feel that not only is it, I think it almost gets overused as a word and people kind of see it as a swear word now, but it's safe enough that I can say it without risking my job, my future, my promotion, my career, something like this. But not just that I can say it, but that it will actually be taken seriously.
Yes.
It's not just oh, that person only works on the shop floor, like, what do they know about this kind of stuff? We're all full of really great ideas, and I think we could do well to listen a little bit more to everybody else.
Yes. And what's in the
Sorry.
Sure, go for it, Caroline.
I just want to say, but the most important thing is the next step. Not only to have the safety to talk about it and someone who's listening and taking you seriously, but then do something about it. I mean, this is the in every company, it doesn't matter in what area it is, how big, how small it is, if it's in Germany or abroad, it doesn't matter. The hardest part is always to get the company to understand, if you want to improve stuff, if you started this whole big thing and build boards and work on transparency and communication and 1,000 things, in the end, you need to make room, time, space for improvement work. And it is work. It's nothing that will happen at night, like magic is going to happen and tomorrow everything is fine because yesterday we talked about the pain points, right? No, it's about really taking actions. And this is then they usually cut off the retrospectives. We don't have time to do the retrospectives. That's the worst part. Well, then at least they are quite honest to say, well, we don't do improvement work. But the second part, or the second reason I see a lot of failing actually, is because then, well, they do retrospectives and they have a lot of cool ideas, but then, well, next day we will work, and what about improvement work? Whatever, we don't have time for that.
We just go back to what we were doing before.
Yeah. And so it's so pitiful to see them come together every few weeks, and they will bring up the same pain points and the same problems again and again and again and again. And then I would rather say, okay, stop doing retrospectives. If you don't improve, if you don't do anything with this information you get here, then please, it's just too painful. Yeah. Put the boards down. Let's not look at the pain.
Yeah.
It's really annoying. Then just ignore it and see how long you can do this. But if you really mean it, then you have room for this.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I've had a very similar experience with people, not just with retrospectives, and I've had exactly that same conversation. Maybe you should stop. Same thing with timesheets, with all the reporting, with the metrics. You've got all of this data. It's costing you a huge amount of time and energy to produce this thing or run the ceremony or whatever it is, and then you do absolutely nothing with it. Why? Well, it just doesn't make any sense that you continue to do all of those activities, spend that much time and energy on stuff if it's not helping. So I like the idea, and as I've said to a couple of people, start with that thing of the problem of what are you trying to solve with it, or if you want to introduce retrospectives, what would you do as a result of having that information, metrics, data, reports, something like this? What will you do with that information? And if you don't have a good enough answer to justify hundreds of hours and thousands of people's time, maybe the answer should be, nope, we don't do this right now. We move on to something else. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just conscious of the time. Yes. And so I want to do something quick before I ask you a closing question. I want to take a moment just to remind everybody who's here, especially those who are here for the first time. I linked in the chat a little bit of self-promotion there. Introduction to Flight Levels workshop. If you're interested to learn more about Flight Levels, it costs €100 and you get a 20% discount if you use the code. It's self-paced online. You even get to hang out with us for an hour and have a little bit of chat and conversation. It's really a cool place to start. If you haven't started your journey, highly recommend checking it out. The other thing, as Klaus has put the buttons on the screen, hit like and subscribe. We would love to be able to have this reach millions of people. Of course, as we say with Flight Club, the first rule of Flight Club is to always talk about Flight Club. So tell your friends, tell your family, hit like and subscribe. It'll help us to spread the word, and we get some more folks here in future. And that would be really, really awesome. Cool. So we are also, actually, we are taking a little bit of a short break for the next couple of weeks, because Klaus and I are taking a little bit of vacation because we've been working really hard for the last few months. And hopefully we will see some sun and so on. So our next episode, we don't have the final date to tell you right now, but we will know fairly soon. So you will get an announcement, but it's probably sometime sort of mid to late August kind of time, because we need to pause and rethink a few things and just enjoy summer in Europe for a while. So that'll be nice. Cool. So enough about us and all of those things. Caroline, as a kind of a closing question, I like to ask a different variation of essentially the same question to all of our guests. We've talked about a lot of different ideas and topics, and specifically in your case, we've explored it in the context of traditional and non-IT companies. If you were kind of starting out again, or you were giving advice to somebody who was just starting out with doing this kind of stuff, what is something that you would recommend they really keep in mind? What's your kind of tip or trick or super important thing? Over to you.
I would definitely say put all the agile methods, all the agile words, all the these definitions, put them all to the side. Really, put them on the side. Sit down with these people and really get to understand what is their problem. And it doesn't matter if it's related to Agile. It doesn't matter if it's any to try to find a connection, or is it flight level, or is this Kanban, or is this Scrum, or is this something? We put this all aside and really just try to really understand what their problem is. And this is the most important thing, I guess. And then I would definitely recommend to set your heart on the core principles behind this, and not the methods and tools. And in my experience, then you find so many cool new solutions you wouldn't think of before, and you will be quite surprised to see what these companies, what the employees themselves will find. You're like, oh, that's actually a pretty cool idea to solve this. Let's do this, right? And not like, okay, this is here this is the Agile way to do this.
That's the recipe.
So really put this all aside and forget Agile for a while. This is my recommendation, and go back to really what's the business need behind all of this? What are we doing here?
That sounds very good and very smart. Awesome. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been lovely to have a chat with you. And thank you so much for everybody who's been asking these great questions in the chat as well. It's made the conversations far more interesting. And it's lovely to have all of you join us. So thank you, Caroline, for taking time out of your, especially today, very busy day, and managing to
I finally get my beer now, yeah.
Use up the last quota of English words. You're going to have to speak German for the next week instead of any English, just so that you can recharge, perhaps. So, yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. And to everybody.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Awesome. Cool. See you all again. Thank you very much, and good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.